By March this year, the world faced an existential crisis.
COVID-19 can be characterized as a pandemic.
On March 20, and for the first time since World War II, Australia closed its borders to all non-residents. The very next day, draconian social distancing rules were imposed. In the coming days, Australians would be grappling with life in lockdown. The Prime Minister had some big decisions to make, and he was under pressure. His handling of the bushfires was attacked as a resounding failure. To keep Australia safe and to keep his job, he had to get this right. The PM formed a new national cabinet of state and territory premiers. But difficult decision followed difficult decision. State borders became barricades and non-essential services were closed, threatening thousands of businesses and the livelihoods of millions of Australians. On March 30, the Morrison government announced a $100 billion lifeline, JobKeeper, a historic wage subsidy to 6 million workers.
We'd put in place JobKeeper, which at $101 billion, Ticky, was the single largest economic support package any Australian government had ever undertaken, and it maintained that formal connection between employers and employees.
The pressure now was on Stuart Robert and his team in government services to pay up.
When the pandemic started, we ended up processing over 1.3 million claims in 55 days, which is 2.5 years' worth in 2 months. And the list goes on of the things we had to do really quickly. There were 50 different policy changes across 20 payments across 14 departments that we had to implement, and of course everyone wants it done tomorrow. And these are very sophisticated systems reaching back to very large IBM mainframes that have to be changed. But they're the complex changes we have to make when policy changes, and they're done fast and they're done quickly. And the policy changes we've made and the tech changes that have gone with that this year is probably 4 or 5 years worth in 1 year. It's quite extraordinary. We even did 300 Medicare schedules. We normally do that in a year. We did that in a week.
IBM stepped in to help with the necessary digital transformation, modernising IT infrastructure through hybrid cloud.
Where we were able to align and really help them was, first of all, to work out how you increase the capacity at speed. And core technologies like underlying cloud, Red Hat, being able to provide the flexibility and the speed to be able to bring online new systems, to be able to expand capacity, were really, really important for them at the time.
The speed Services Australia operated at was crucial to gaining public trust and building the platform of consent needed to get on top of the virus. And it worked. When compared to most other countries in the world, Australia succeeded in winning the trust and containing the virus.
I think we've learnt that when the public trusts their governments, they do better. Australia and New Zealand are the poster countries for many reasons, because one, they responded rapidly, and two, they cooperate with scientists very well. They are very scientifically driven, and three, the communities trust their government. Regardless of who they vote for, the communities understand that governments are here to look after the people. So I think we're very fortunate.
I think what's been really effective in Australia is the public policy response, the clarity of the response, the track and trace capability that state governments have put in manually, and then the COVID Safe app for state governments that are leaning in has just augmented that. So, for example, in New South Wales, we're sitting right now, 544 cases were found because the app identified areas and clusters that manual tracing hadn't picked up. So the app was designed to augment manual tracing, and when used in the midst of a public policy response like the New South Wales government has done, proved very effective.
The public sector worked on saving lives. But to save livelihoods, it was the private sector, business, that the government desperately needed to bring on board. The Prime Minister rang Nev Power, a man who had worked in manufacturing and construction and later mining as head of Fortescue Metals, to lead the newly established COVID Commission.
The Prime Minister and the key ministers decided very early on in the outbreak of the virus that they needed to enlist businesses' support and to use every means possible to help deal with the virus and continue our supply chains and make sure that Australians had all of the needs, all of the products and services they needed. So the Prime Minister and his team put together a list of names and then rung us individually to ask us whether we would step up for our country.
2020 was supposed to be the year the government would deliver its first budget surplus in over a decade. Those dreams were smashed, replaced by a clear and present danger. Many businesses were on life support, mental health problems were rising. What the country needed, perhaps even more than a vaccine, was jobs.
And in the last 4 months alone, Tikki, we've seen 446,000 jobs being created, 60% of which have gone to women, 40% of which have gone to young people. So we have seen the recovery underway. The Morrison government's message to all Australians is that we have your back. Yeah. And we have a plan to rebuild our economy and create more jobs. We knew we had to put in place that next stage of the recovery plan, which included encouraging business to invest, to hire and to grow.
It's critical, Tikki, and I think the key to this is developing the confidence in businesses to invest and employ people. And this is where we've been encouraging businesses to look for the opportunities in the economy, and governments have provided enormous support for businesses to encourage investment and to provide protection against the downsides that have occurred. This is about then identifying those opportunities in the economy where we can grow and where we can respond really quickly to offset those where it'll take longer to recover.
The government wants its gas-fired recovery to turbocharge the sector that can generate so many future jobs. Advanced manufacturing.
We're not picking winners, we're playing to our strengths. And we've seen that with the manufacturing strategy, where we've identified a half a dozen areas where Australia does have comparative advantages. And food is one area, defence industry is another, the exciting space industry, medical devices, the resources sector, particularly critical minerals. Again, Australia's got great strength in those areas. That's really important. And then renewable and clean energy. Australia's got a burgeoning sector for renewable and clean energy, and major investments have been made. So by playing to our strengths, we can align the interests of industry and government and therefore deliver the best possible results. The jobs are coming back. The economic recovery in Australia is now underway, particularly as we've been able to suppress the virus and the restrictions have been eased.
For all the horror and harm that COVID-19 has inflicted on Australia and the world, it's also driven a response that it's helping to fight the virus and underpin recovery for government and business. In just a few months, technology has jumped years ahead of where it would have been.
Technology is playing a very important part of this and can continue to play more. We've seen a lot of businesses switch to online. We've seen a very rapid uptake of new technologies, and there's an opportunity to do more here. From the simple QR scanning that can allow your identity to be very easily monitored across multiple hospitality outlets, for example, right through to e-invoicing, which will provide benefits to customers of businesses, but will allow small businesses to be paid much quicker and reduce their working capital.
It's absolutely critical to our way of life and to our economic prospects. That's why the Prime Minister and I announced a digital transformation strategy with a focus on enabling business and obviously government to perform as best as possible in a technologically efficient and effective way. We've also seen new jobs and new businesses being developed in this space, and they will continue to be encouraged, and they'll continue to be an important part of the recovery. We have put an additional $2 billion, Tikki, into research and development, and those tax incentives will help companies, both small start-up companies but also larger established companies, invest in those most technologically advanced alternatives and solutions.
I think technology is one of the key components of solving and recovering, but it flows across both business and government. And why it's so key is, first and foremost, every business, every government organisation needs to be thinking about how they can do things even more effectively. And the use of technologies like cloud, like AI, like blockchain, integration, and really thinking about automation, they're all things that people have really tested over the last period of time and found ways to recreate businesses.
Investing in new technologies is important, but tech alone does not bring results. Business needs a skilled workforce.
We do need to keep looking at how we build skills and the kind of opportunity that's there. I mean, I was just reading an industry report yesterday suggesting there'll be another 100,000 jobs in technology over the next 4 years. So the kind of opportunity for recovery and getting people back into work through reskilling is massive. We have focused on a number of key areas, and one of them is with Soldier On, who's a not-for-profit here in Australia, who helps both servicemen and women and their families who are now looking at entering the workforce.
Under the Skills Build programme, over 3,000 veterans and their families will have access to online learning programmes, reskilling them in everything from web development to cybersecurity. Veterans like Soldier On ambassador Jeff Shapiro. After serving in the Royal Australian Navy for 10 years, Jeff was medically discharged.
Originally I had pancreatitis, and that was causing me to have acute pain. Following on from that, there was a development of mental health issues such as PTSD, depression, anxiety, and that was what I had to deal with, whilst also dealing with the whole transitioning from defence into the civilian lifestyle again. It was a massive change to actually achieve all that.
On leaving the Navy, reskilling was central to Jeff's success in rebuilding his life.
It provided a great opportunity for me to actually transition and land on my feet. And ultimately, where I landed within the corporate sector was quite high up compared to where I was expecting to land.
For Jeff, the skills investment launch promises to equip veterans with the qualifications they need to prosper.
That platform has some qualifications and certifications in there, such as Red Hat training, that's very in demand within the industry. But it's in demand and it's expensive. So the provision of the IBM platform has allowed for free training, absolutely free, for the veterans and their families. This is going to have a massive impact on the financial stability of veterans' families.
For the Prime Minister, the message is quite simple.
The Skills Build program is about jobs. And we're about jobs, and anyone who wants to create jobs is a partner of mine. COVID, no COVID. The challenge is the same, of equipping our veterans with skills. The challenge is the same for our workforce more broadly. We know that the COVID-19 pandemic is impacting particularly on young people in a way that is devastating for them. But at the same time, we need to be equipping people for those jobs, and digital skills are absolutely central to that for all of us to be successful in the decade that is ahead.